It's great to have Shabbat here together. Truthfully, almost every Shabbat is exceptional. How lucky we are, how fortunate, all of us are fortunate to be able to be a part of this. Shabbat has a certain wonder in it, independent of our gathering. Shabbat contains oneg, oneg Shabbat. It literally doesn't mean tea and pastries, but rather it's about the enjoyment of this day. And here it is enhanced by the number of worshipers that gather, an exceptional number, visitors and congregants, and the spirit which is brought by your participation in this service as we are led by Cantor Fishman and this wonderful choir. How good it is, how lucky we are. I do want to do a little commercial here, and that is this. The leadership of this community has decided a long time ago that we want to provide really wonderful kiddushes for everybody. And I also want you to know that they're really, really expensive. And we want to continue to do it. And we would love nothing more than your support to be able to do that. So think about us during the course of the week, okay? Okay? Okay. All right. Today there is for many of us particular joy because of Rebecca Sherman. Rebecca is very special and wonderful, but there is a unique joy in seeing a young woman who was once a little baby here and affirming her coming of age as a community. And so we're celebrating with Allison and with Jeff and with Sabrina. They've been a part of our lives, of all of our lives who are here day in and day out. Where did Allison go? Don't tell me. Allison, you'll have to tell her I spoke about her, okay? Yeah. Okay, Allison is a daily presence in our life as she works in our office and helps us communicate better and beautifies everything that we do, and we're so appreciative of you, Allison. Yeah. I'd like to simply settle in the comfort and warmth and joy of all of this. But it's very hard. For a moment I can do it, and it's a bit of a relief and an escape. A relief and an escape from important and challenging Torah reading as we're trying to navigate our way in a very dark world. In the Torah today, we read about the last 3 plagues, and which included the 9th plague that described a darkness that was so thick that it could be felt, and it disabled the Egyptian people. And then there's a strange description which says that among the Hebrew slaves there was light. How is it possible? The rabbis chose to view it metaphorically. Amongst the many commentaries, there's one which said, and we spoke of, Rabbi Applebaum spoke about it last night, and I spoke about it in my message yesterday. That is, there was darkness because the Egyptians were blind to the suffering of others. They didn't see each other's pain. There is darkness in a world where people cannot see the other. But the light was about the capacity for the Hebrews to recognize not only their own suffering, but the suffering of all of those around them. And so what the rabbis are saying is that empathy creates compassion and warmth and light. You know, we all have lots of complaints and read about complaints having to do with technology and the media, and amongst other things, the distractions which are created by them. But there are also some very positive things. For all of us have available a huge selection of entertainment possibilities, entertainment opportunities every evening. Through cable outlets and live streaming, there's so many films and series that we can watch. So many that some evenings I find myself sitting next to Toby scrolling through the variety of options and deciding what I don't want to see, and by the time I get to what I want to see, it's too late. I'm ready to go to bed. I've watched some extraordinary films and series over the last few months, but I've also found myself turning certain films and television programs off rather quickly because there's so much violence. There's so much violence in our world, and I don't need it to be part of my entertainment. I'm feeling it as being quite offensive. I realize that watching violence often serves as an outlet for our own frustrations. But I also know that it's not as if it takes away our yearning, the yearnings we might have. I realize that films which capture scenes of revenge don't free us of that desire which can be so very painful, unhealthy, and in fact immoral. Quentin Tarantino should forgive me. From Tel Aviv, by the way. Many of us have a deep commitment to the pursuit of Jewish values. And that commitment should move us to recognize the essence in the preservation of that which is humane, the preservation of our humanity, and therefore constantly be in the pursuit of justice and peace. Human restraint is a value, a virtue. And we know that justice needs law. Those of us who are of a certain age may remember the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem. And if you're younger, I advise you to look for The Man in the Glass Booth, the film that was made about it, or just to go on YouTube to see the film clips of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem. That trial, as painful as it was for people, portrayed the dignity of our people and the nation of Israel, as it brought to justice one of the perpetrators of perhaps the greatest crime against humanity. But, proudly, it was done with order and it was done with respect. History has taught us that tribalism and often nationalism can conflict with other values that we hold dear. As we recognize what's good in ourselves, we also recognize the potential for evil in every one of us. In the very beginning, in the story of creation, we learn that people were created with yotzrot. It means inclinations. We have a yetzer tov. We have an inclination to do what's good in this world, to give to others, to be kind, to help improve the world. And we each have a yetzer ra. There's lurking within us an inclination for selfishness. Our own egos can make us cruel and, yes, do bad things. Some have asserted that this yetzer ra is the essential reason for the development of our religion and our legal tradition, because all of us have basic instincts that need to be controlled. And our capacity to do that has led to the creation of communities of deeply caring people, people who show kindness, warmth, and sensitivity. And we give witness to this when we see the responses of Israelis and Jews throughout the world to support and to work in the rehabilitation of the destruction that we witnessed. When we know there are thousands of Jews who have gone to Israel and participated in not only visits, but also in work that needs to be done in the Negev. Rabbi Applebaum just came back with a group from B'nai Torah. But more than that, we know and we hear the voices of so many Jews, advocates of Israel, who are deeply pained by the vision, the view they have of the destruction of Gaza. It's not like destruction gives us pride. And this is the essence of our notion of being an Or L'Goyim. This is the light which is mentioned in the 9th plague. This is how we give light and spread light. We are at war, and every one of us knows that we would not be in the war. We would not be close to war had the brutal events perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th not occurred. I would like to touch on our responses and the obligations that have come with them. We know that over the years, Hamas has created not only a surprisingly powerful military operation with, we believe, close to 500 miles of tunnels under the ground, but they've also created an incredible PR machine. They have drawn Israel into situations whereby Israel, we know, is now at The Hague, the world court, defending itself from war crimes, including genocide. How twisted. Who could have possibly believed that the response to October 7th would have us being accused of genocide? Launching missiles from schools and hospitals and mosques, tunnels that support a terrorist infrastructure and hide munitions, sometimes emerging out of the bedrooms of children, using innocent children as human shields, and the recent news of Israeli soldiers supposedly desecrating graves from cemeteries. But cemeteries who have been located where missiles have been shot and where it is believed hostages have been buried. And so Israel searches for those bodies. It's created images that have turned the victim into the victimizer. Israel has lost so much in this war and tragically has been outwitted, both in the field and in defense of its people, as well as on the front page of the newspapers and throughout the world in the lead stories in the media. Too often, Israel is too late to be effective in its responses. I have a rhetorical question. Why would anybody believe anything that comes from the Hamas health ministry? Why? Why does the world believe it? They already have expressed to us their intent. Their evil is essential to what and who they are. Why does the Western press treat the Hamas health ministry as if it's authoritative? But we all know it's also, as we keep hearing, complex. But more than that, it's crazy, and it's so hostile. There are many who celebrate destruction. There are many, tragically, who bask in the joy of revenge. It brings me to the Torah. When our ancestors escaped Egypt, and they danced and sang as the armies of Egypt drowned in the sea, we learn of God's anger. And we know that's why when we sit at our Seder on Passover, we remove wine from our cups as we recite the 10 plagues. We are not to take joy in the death of our enemies. And now we know we are fighting literally for our existence, and yet the war, it seems so disproportionate. And that sense of the disproportionality of the war makes the world confused. If you haven't looked at the half-hour speech, the opening argument at The Hague by Israel's leading attorney Tal Becker, you might not realize that this isn't a simple story of a powerful Israel oppressing the weak Palestinian Gazans. And I strongly recommend, after Shabbat, you go to YouTube and look up Tal Becker at The Hague. Yet we see so much destruction and so much death, and we know we share in the responsibility for that. Tactical wisdom, however, we've learning may be found elsewhere. Somewhere in the middle, there must be a desire for a humane response. When the time is right, we will see that. We know Israel, first and foremost, has been obligated to defend its citizens, our people, our brothers and our sisters, its borders, its country. But yet, there needs to be a constant commitment to fight within the framework of the conventions of war. War is a reality, tragically. Over the last decades, I have always felt so proud of the IDF who fight with an understanding of war, even war having ethical demands. There's a code of conduct that every single Israeli soldier carries in his or her front pocket. And yet they're deeply challenged right now. One of the horrors of the 10 plagues was that Egyptian people, innocent people, suffered because of Pharaoh's desires. And Rebecca, this is where I'm going to speak about what you spoke about. That type of suffering that was brought by God is referenced as collective punishment. Innocent Egyptians suffered. We know that collective punishment is morally reprehensible. Our people experienced it during the time of the Nazis, which is one of the reasons why we didn't see more Jews fight back, because a person knew that if they tried to fight back, if they stood up, if they tried to escape, their children, their neighbors, their families would be tortured, taken away. There's a medieval commentator known as Sforno. He raised the issue in the 13th century, and he had no answers, but he had a question. It's a question about these plagues. He said, how could God have allowed this to happen to innocents? And long before Elie Wiesel, even Rashi had condemnation for those who live amongst evil and do nothing. The suffering of innocent when people remain silent. When one lives in a cruel environment, one shares responsibility to fight against it. There's a powerful notion of collective responsibility that stretches from one individual to all people. I have this very vivid image that I will always carry with me. I was visiting one of the most gruesome places that I have ever seen in this world, a death camp, Majdanek in Lublin, Poland. It's a site where it's estimated that 600,000 to 800,000 Jews were gassed and burned in ovens. But one of the things that made it even more disturbing was today it's a park where locals take walks and picnic. But around this concentration camp today are houses which stood there in the 30s and the 40s where average people lived. People lived around this death camp. Gas chambers and ovens were churning out death. And they lived their lives as if they were normal, and there was silence. The plagues inspire us to ask a few questions about responsibility for the deaths of innocents. We have to ask those questions. I would turn a table here and not allow the question to only be about Israel's response, but also the local population in Gaza, and for that matter, the world that remained silent as a war machine was being built, both figuratively and literally, under the bedrooms of children, the basements of hospitals, and the gates of cemeteries. Certainly our special, the agencies of defense that know what's going on around the world knew what was going on in Gaza. And it's a question especially to those who forgot on October 9th what had happened on October 7th. It is sadly a dark world. We can bring light to our lives, our families, our communities, moments like this. But our responsibility goes beyond that. It is to never forget our mission to bring light to the world. Revenge cannot be our motive. Pursuing life, peace must be. We know there's pain, but we must always accept the responsibility all of us have to alleviate it. Truth needs to be told. When we are guilty, we have to accept it and show our responsibility. When we are falsely accused, we have to stand up and show the world the truth. We must be witnesses to truth. If The Hague will execute justice, we hope it will, we pray it will, we must demand that that justice be based on truth. And this is where light resides. We should never fear truth or critique. In the words of the psalmist, we recall that peace is the handmaiden of justice, And justice and love must be founded on truth. The life of the Spirit demands we pursue understanding, inspire a willingness to love mercy and a commitment to justice. And finally, a willingness to be humble, to walk humbly with God. And on this Shabbat, in the face, basking in all of this light and all of this pride, we understand how important it is that we be merciful and that we be humble. Shabbat Shalom.